Hi, Mary.
Hi, Christine. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad.
Who else is with us?
It looks like my dad just logged on.
Let me see. I'll take the share off. Hi, Mike.
Oh, maybe not.
Maybe he's listening.
Hi, Christine. Hi, Mary.
Hey, Dad.
How are you both doing?
We're good. How are you? What are you drinking?
You know what? I'm drinking a lavender and chamomile tea because my nerves are shot.
That sounds good.
I started my teaching day at 7 a.m.
You did?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Wow,
must
that's
be
a long
shot.
day.
I've been really looking forward to this session because of the topic, and it's just gonna calm me right down.
No.
Normally I'd make this tea before bed, but it's going to be an early bedtime tonight for sure.
You're not teaching at Wilkes anymore, are you?
I'm not. Gosh, I left there 18 months ago. Yeah.
So it's funny. So through this pandemic, like we hear about on our side of the business, you hear about, companies that you can invest in that have problems, as we know, like airlines. Warren Buffett sold all his airline stocks the other day, he said, and
Yeah.
obviously cruise ships, hotel companies, and it's the whole economy, but there's certain areas that really get blasted. And what people don't realize, because they're not like, you don't invest in the capital markets in universities, but the higher education system is as bad as like the airlines right now. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, Mary's getting a master's in finance at Hopkins, and the president sent a letter, Johns Hopkins, and I mean, it's a major institution, and they're going to lose 400 and some million dollars, they pointed out. And I was talking to a fellow at Wisconsin, and he's on the board there, and he said over $1 billion. And then like Wilkes and those schools, it's just, they can't compete. Like they're fighting to survive. They're fighting to survive now.
I really can't fathom it because they were on shaky ground when I left. And I don't really know anything about their new president. And I loved Pat Leahy, by the way. I was very sad to see him go.
Well, Mary's mom is my wife, and she would leave me for Pat Leahy, I'm sure.
Oh.
And I would leave me for Pat Leahy.
Yeah.
But now he's persona non grata. Like after he left, they found out all the, like not his, he was aggressive and built, and then there's bills to be paid. And the bills were, interestingly, so Wilkes had this major meeting and called everybody in. The nursing department is where Kathleen works, is like wildly profitable, and all the others. And I mean, it was really, really bad. Like Kathleen started this program 7, 8, 9 years ago, the graduate program. It went from 0 to 900 students online. So it was making, Pat used to say it was making like 4 or 5 million profit for the school, and they needed that. But my point is that in January, before the pandemic, Wilkes announced layoffs, position cuts, no pension deposits, 0 for everybody for the next year, no raises, 5 and 10% cuts in pay across the board, shared sacrifice. That was before this, all the things that all the schools are announcing now, no pensions, this. So Wilkes they are really not it's almost that they're in a good spot because they started doing this stuff in January. So now the other schools had to do it for other reasons. But yeah, it's a difficult situation there.
Yeah. I moved back here about 5 years ago. So I was only doing adjunct work there, which was strictly out of the love for teaching and just wanting to be with students. But I could not justify doing that any longer.
No.
I mean, it was just basically like mad money. By the time I paid for parking and like all the stuff that they don't pay for when you're an adjunct, I just thought, this is crazy. and, you know, and increasingly, as you probably know, many universities rely on their adjunct faculty because the salaries are so awful. I mean, truly. You know what? My brother put it into perspective for me. He said, do you realize that just one person in one of your classes pays whatever that student pays for that particular class, pays your salary for that semester?
Yeah.
Like just one. And it wasn't even that, you know. So Mary, if you're at Hopkins, you're doing that all online anyway, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was already online, so for me it hasn't been too big of a change, but I'm the minority in that regard. Most people have been disrupted.
Well, I did see a report just 2 nights ago where university presidents are in this dilemma of trying to figure out whether the fall is even going to be possible.
Yeah.
When you think about bringing students in, for even if you're in a state that where the numbers are low, but bringing in students from all over the world potentially, and what that might create.
So most right now are modeling not having students on campus. In their budgeting models, they're not announcing that, and they're being hopeful, but they're building the models to, can they survive without having students on campus in the fall?
I think that's wise.
But then you have the repercussions from that. People said, like, I'm sending my kid to Yale, you're charging $60,000, and he or she's sitting home in Pittston, Pennsylvania online. We're not paying you to go to Yale.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's no one's fault. It's just horrible, you know?
Yeah. I was thinking about that in terms of, you know, even places like Wyoming Seminary, private high schools that are confronting something very similar, where they might be bringing students back from all over the world.
Yeah.
So.
Is there like a dog or a cat behind you?
Yeah, that's my Great Pyrenees. She's quietly resting on the sofa. I felt like a criminal today. My groomer, she badly needed grooming, and she set up a location out in Moscow, which I have not been to Moscow since I was a kid, and saw Stella today for grooming.
I could see like big white fur ball moving around. I'm thinking,
She's a Great Pyrenees. She's a large breed dog. She's resting.
Looks like a big fluff mare.
Yeah, she does. I just see her tail.
Named Fluffy.
Yeah, she's like a pony.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So are you ready you want to get started?
Sure, if you are.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Mayor Nina or Olivia aren't joining us? Nobody?
I know that Nina said she couldn't. I don't know. I could text Olivia and see.
So have you been practicing during this time? Yeah, good.
So the hardest part of practicing is like, I think I have to do it in the morning. This morning I got up for the first time in a long time, and I did like my exercise in the morning, because I find myself, if I don't do exercise or meditation by like a certain time period, like at 6 o'clock, your brain is going so many different ways.
Yeah.
Like you're realizing who you have to get back to, you didn't get back to, what you have to prepare for the morning. It's almost impossible. As much as like that's the point, it's so hard.
Yeah, and I have found that the days are speeding by, and by 6 o'clock, I'm looking at the clock, thinking about going to bed, or pouring a cocktail.
Yeah, exactly. Bam.
But yeah, no, I agree with you. I've always had a morning practice, and then I also 4 o'clock for me is a good time. That time of day, something really, really short is really helpful for me. That said, the workouts in the morning have been really helpful.
Yeah, today I feel so good that I just finished it and have that fatigue. Because then at night, if I do work out at night, I either do or don't, whatever. But if I do or don't, like, you find yourself that your brain is like buzzing and tired, but you're physically can't sleep because your brain won't like shut down. So it's so then you end up drinking, like you said, a cocktail, and that gives you like an hour, and then you wake back up and you're like, should I have I can't have another one.
I think it would be interesting to study people's drinking habits over the course of this.
I've actually drank much less throughout this than usual.
Yeah. How do you?
I mean, I actually don't even have alcohol in my apartment, but I like to go out. I'm more of a social drinker, so it's not like half of the fun for me with drinking is like being around people, and you can't right now. So
Mary, are you local?
no, I live in Philly.
Okay. Yeah. I think they're probably stricter there than we are here, right?
Yeah, the whole city has been shut down. Well, actually only like a week prior to the rest of Pennsylvania. Like the mayor of Philly shut down things. It was like 5 or 6 days prior to Governor Wolf putting the whole state on a shutdown.
Yeah.
I don't think things will open up here for quite some time. Like you can do on Saturday night, I got takeouts from a restaurant in the city, and we were driving around, and it's eerie. Like the whole city is just dark. Everything's shut down. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a very strange feeling.
I know it is. Well, so this is lesson 6, and lesson 5 launched us into a really, really important part of the series, which is mindfulness of feelings. And the last time we were here, I talked about the idea that everything that comes before mindfulness of feelings is really designed to prepare us to take this 3-lesson journey very, very deeply into feelings. And I just want to, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to use some slides because I thought it would be helpful. But the last time that we were here, one of the things that we learned was this beautiful protocol called RAIN. And the acronym RAIN stands for recognize, allow or accept, investigate, nurture, and non-attach. And Mike, were you here? Were you listening last time, or were you not present for lesson 5?
No, I was present.
Oh, you were? You were just quiet.
Yeah, so I had my computer in the office. I was able to listen in. I was chatting in, but I brought my laptop today so that we could communicate.
So RAIN is a really great tool that you can use as you're guiding yourself through meditation, especially when there's a particular feeling state or emotional state that feels really difficult that you've been grappling with. And if you remember, recognize really stands for having the ability to have an awareness that, you know what, something is coming up here, whether it's anger, fear, joy, it can be something positive as well, but something is here. And that awareness is in and of itself mindfulness, an expression of mindfulness. We talked a little bit last time about how so many of us, even now, because of being in stress response, can be cut off from the signs that the body is giving us, sort of the somatic signs that the body is giving us that we're in distress. So do I have the awareness that something is going on here, that a feeling has come up? Can I, especially if it's a difficult feeling, can I just allow it to be here, or come into a state of acceptance? And the reason that A is really important is because we find that with difficult emotions or feelings, we have a tendency to want to resist them. I don't want to feel this. You know, we're really, really fighting with that feeling, or we're allowing it to overwhelm us like the wave of a tsunami, or we just sort of cut off from it completely. So any one of those things requires energy. Resistance, I don't want this to be happening. It's stressful energy. Overwhelm, feeling engulfed, or just completely shutting down. Shutting down actually requires energy. Versus
Olivia, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to tell you that Olivia is joining. I told her we just started. So.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Hi.
How are you?
Oh, my video's not working today, it looks like. Sorry.
Can you see the slide?
I can see the slide, but you can't see my face.
We were just reviewing the RAIN protocol because this is something I'm going to emphasize this time and next time, because I just want you to memorize it so that it's always with you. I'll tell you another important reason for that in a second, but you know, can I just allow myself to be with the discomfort of whatever this is? And if you remember last time, I took you through a guided meditation where you got to investigate the feeling like it was, like you're a detective. And I asked you questions like, if this feeling you're experiencing had a color, what would it be? If it had a shape, if it had a size, if it had a sound, if it had a weight, if you could travel to the edges of it and look beyond it, what would you see? Do you remember why the investigation is important, or what that does?
No.
I do. I think it, I don't know. See, I said something and then you said something else, but it's so you could detach from it and let it go. Like it's no longer part of you.
Yeah, if I can investigate what's there, I create a natural space between me and it. I mean, think about the role of an actual investigator. An investigator is coming into a situation as an outside observer to try to figure out what's going on. So when you go into investigative mode with your own feelings, that's what you're doing. You're in investigation mode. What does this look like? What does this feel like? Is it okay for this to be here? And it creates this natural distance. And once I've created the distance, it's not owning me. It's not running me. And that's when I get to have the ability to come out of reactivity, freaking out, going ballistic, having a tantrum, feeling really overwhelmed, to, okay, this is here. I get to respond to this. I get to make a choice here. So the investigative piece is a skill. In terms of, for example, emotional intelligence and building emotional intelligence, all of these things, these 4 simple things, help to cultivate that. I know what I'm feeling. I'm not afraid of it. I'm going to allow it. I can investigate it with curiosity and develop a space between me and it, so it's not running me. It's now not yanking me around. And then N, 2 ways we can think about it. One is one of the ways that Olivia just suggested, which is I don't have to attach to it at all. Just because anger is present, it doesn't have to become me. I don't have to become it. We don't have to be attached. Or you can nurture it. Like, it's okay that this is here. The last thing I want to do when I'm feeling upset related to feelings that we might label as negative is to get upset with myself for having the feeling in the first place. And last time I talked about, for example, when I get anxious because I'm anxious, or I get angry at myself for being anxious. You should know better. You practice meditation, all of that chatter. where you become very judgmental about how you're feeling. Again, it's an expenditure of energy. It's stressful. It creates stress in the body and the mind. So just being kind and nurturing with yourself, no matter what you're feeling. This is the process of rain. So if I am confronted with a difficult situation, it doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing, I can drop into rain. In fact, practitioners of rain will tell you that if you practice this enough as a meditative practice, it sort of becomes part of you and part of how you cope with things. And what is really neat about rain is you start moving through, recognize, allow, investigate so quickly that you can get yourself to non-attachment. You can just get yourself, I acknowledge this is how I'm feeling. I'm making space for it to be here. I'm an observer of it, so there's that distance, and I'm not attached to it. That's freedom. And we're going to talk more about how that's freedom in a moment. So this was really the heart of lesson 5. I want to introduce you to a model that I didn't intend to share with you, but I think it's important now. I think it's important now as we try to understand ourselves and why we might be feeling how we're feeling. It's really important if you're dealing with clients who are really upset about what's happening now. This gives you a glimpse into their psychology. This model, the acronym here is actually SCARF, S-C-A-R-F. And it comes from Dr. David Rock, who was actually very interested in studying human motivation. And he was interested in studying human motivation related to sales. Like what motivates someone to make a purchase or not make a purchase, or to, secure your services or someone else's services. What motivates people to make the choices they make, despite the fact that they have a lot of different choices? And this is the model that he developed, but this model is so applicable in almost any situation where you want to try to understand why it is that human beings come undone quickly, like why we go from 0 to 100 really quickly. So I want to run you through the model, and I want to ask you as we're going through, which of these qualities is your biggest trigger? Because we all get triggered, but there's going to be one here that's really going to strike you. S, status. This is a little bit deceiving, and I wish there was a different word to describe the first letter, but it's important. Every human being likes to know where they stand in reference to a situation. Like, where am I in the hierarchy of things? Where is my place? It really speaks to the human need to belong and to feel like you're part of. It's sort of like when you're in high school and you're kind of trying to figure out, where do I fit? What's my status here? When our status is threatened, when we don't know where we stand, when we don't know what role we're supposed to be playing in an organization or in our families, when any kind of disruption occurs in the system and we don't know where we stand anymore, we can get really triggered and really upset. So you want to think about this notion of status as a potential threat. We all want to know that we belong, and we want to know where we stand. Certainty, C, makes perfect sense. Although we enjoy variety and unpredictability and spontaneity for the most part, most human beings need routine, need a sense of certainty. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's happening with my money? what is this going to look like 2 months from now? What is going on here? Certainty is so threatened right now. And for some people, it's so threatened that they might be reverting to almost cave person-like triggering and reactivity, where they're just not at all able to manage themselves very well because certainty is in complete upheaval. Autonomy, A. Autonomy speaks to every human being's need for independence. We are born with it. It is hardwired into us. Watch an infant move from infancy to crawling to walking. On almost every occasion, they are crawling away from you, not toward you. Part of what we're grappling with teenagers is their natural desire for autonomy. When that is threatened, we get really upset, really triggered. All of us, to some degree, have our autonomy threatened right now because we cannot go where we want to go. I will never forget the day that my parents had to take away my grandfather's car keys. He was 86 years old, and he died within 2 years. And it was that autonomy, when that was taken from him, triggered him to the degree. I believe that was a turning point in his health. It just declined. That is how important it is. Leaders must know that one of the most motivating things that you can do for someone you're leading is to let them take the reins from time to time, to make sure they will leave your organization if they don't have opportunities to be autonomous. It's critical. It might seem contradictory, but we also have just as strong a need for connection. So whenever our relationships are threatened for any reason, we get highly triggered. Many of our relationships are threatened right now. For some of us, it's because we can't be with people that we love, individuals who are trying to maintain long-distance relationships, potentially on shaky ground, families that are living all together all the time. This is a great deal of the work that I've been doing recently, is that relationship coaching in terms of how everything feels highly reactive and triggered now because we're all together all the time. So we will get triggered when relationship is threatened. And finally, fairness makes a lot of sense. Whenever we feel that we're not being treated fairly, we can get really triggered. The better way to look at this is whenever I feel like I'm not being treated with dignity and respect, can cause a highly reactive triggering in me. So SCARF, status, certainty, autonomy, relationship, fairness. When I'm feeling really charged up, really irritated, very angry, really triggered and reactive, the way that I use this model, I catch myself because I know how that feels. I step back just for a bit and I ask myself, I run myself through SCARF. Christine, in what ways are you feeling like you're questioning your place here? In what way are you feeling really uncertain right now? Or in what way is this person or situation triggering your need to be independent? In what way is your connection fragile right now? In what way might you be being treated with a lack of dignity or respect? That gives me my answer. And if I can understand why I'm triggered, it almost immediately diminishes the power of the trigger. It lessens the charge. Doesn't change what's going on. It lessens the charge. The other way this works is when someone in your life or when a client really triggered and you're the recipient of it, or you're having to listen to it or deal with it, same thing. You just sort of within yourself, you pause and you ask, all right, in what way is this person's sense of belonging being triggered? Their certainty, their independence, their connections. There's a lot of triggering now related to fairness. This is a brand new business. This is so unfair that this is happening right now. Or it's really unfair that I cannot watch my child graduate from high school or graduate from college. It's really unfair that our daughter's wedding has been canceled or postponed. There's a lot of this sense of this virus taking something from us and it feeling really unfair. So a lot of our emotional triggering right now is related to fairness. So I'm curious, how does all that, what resonates with you about that model?
So I like that. I actually wrote it down. Who's the doctor? David Rock?
Dr. David Rock. Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, it did resonate with me because I realized like the most emotional clients when I was thinking through some of the like clients that we have and I realized, yeah, their triggers are on uncertainty, status. They're not as rich as their neighbor. Like literally they're the things that infuriate them. And now I know why they're triggered by those.
Wow, that's one I hadn't even, that's not even one that I had thought about, you know, in the work that you do, like infuriated.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people would like a factor of what we always say, people, everybody says, oh, they have fear and greed. And Warren Buffett always says, no, they have envy. They have envy of, they think that their neighbor won the lottery and they didn't or something, you know? So status is people when they feel they lost status or are losing status and uncertainty, and then it becomes unfair. Everything is so unfair because they do grade, not everybody, but the problem clients now, I know what they're doing. They're always grading themselves against something that doesn't exist. They think it exists. Like somebody's always doing better. I mean, I have people worth 12, 15, $20 million. One that is convinced that everybody else is winning and he's losing all the time. But I realized, like you said, it's not just, I know that he's think that I've been with him for 20 some years, but it's, now that I think about it, he does have these triggers. Like he keys on one of these things and it always does revolve around a scarf topic, even though he doesn't call it that. It's like, sure. I heard so-and-so made money. Why didn't we make that much money? I heard that this is so unfair that now I need to know this is, I can't sleep at night, like the certainty and yeah. Those.
Well, what's interesting about scarf is that when you have, like, let's say you've got three things going on at once, worried about status, worried about certainty, and triggered by fairness, then you've got a relatively high level of triggering and reactivity. No wonder he's not sleeping at night. When you've got when you've got all five going on, and right now we are living globally with people who have all five of these triggers.
Yeah.
So what you want to think about in terms of triggering is this person is in stress response.
Right.
That part of the brain that's in survival mode is turned on, highly reactive. They have lost connection with the frontal cortex, which really helps us to calmly make decisions and calmly have the ability to have a very clear picture of what's going on here. So you've got really, really strong reactivity. So I'm glad that I brought this to you today because it's really not part of this lesson, but as I was thinking about what does this lesson look like, given what's going on here, I thought it might be valuable. And once you learn SCARF, you heard it, you can't unhear it. It's going to stay with you. And you're going to begin to see people and yourself a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mary, what'd you think?
So I agree with my dad, what he was saying. It makes a lot of sense in terms of like how you see people react, but it also makes a lot of sense right now. Like, something that I personally am struggling with is the lack of certainty. It's really hard to like go day by day, just doing the same thing, the same motions, like motivating yourself to just keep going forward without any sort of like light at the end of the tunnel. Like, we know one day in the future we will come out of this, but we don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know what it's going to look like. So that whole, like, that for me, I realized is a big trigger and a big part of what causes like my like emotional distress during this. Some days more than others. So it's good to think about it in that regard, like how to kind of stop it.
Well, what's important about what you just said is your emotional distress grows out of this real need for certainty. It's under threat. It's under like attack. And unlike other crises that we've seen in our lives, in our lifetime, there was kind of a sense of when it was going to end. Like, there's a time frame for a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake. Even 9/11, it was an event that occurred and then it was over, and then there was a lot of cleanup and a lot of healing. This is really different. And so there's a lot of uncertainty about how this is even affecting our psyches moving forward, which is one of the reasons why there's a big prediction that we're in a pandemic. The epidemic to follow will be a mental health epidemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't foresee, like, if this, like, today alone, I kind of got myself, I guess, triggered by everything you just were talking about. And your head, like, goes in a spiral. And then I keep circling back to, like, how are people going to live like this for a year? Like, this, it's just so, like, it's the uncertainty. Like, I can't get past, like, how this can just go on for that long. Like, it's nuts.
So that's when you feel the depth of that trigger, you can drop into something like, I really recognize right now how triggered I am and how scared I am. Can I just allow that to be here? Because part of our suffering is, I don't want to feel the discomfort of this uncertainty.
Right.
Like, no. Or this tsunami wave that washes over us, or totally just going numb. And then do that little investigation with it. So again, that's a tool, and trust me, I'm feeling all of these things as well, but I'm just thinking about the things that have really helped me. And rain has helped me quite a bit. It's always helped me, but it's important now, but it feels important at a totally different level. There's a different attitude. Hey, Olivia, can you hear us?
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, I really liked it too. I like what Mike said, the way he identified it with the clients, because it's funny. It's funny to see. I guess what I struggle with is like being able to identify it in people, and then maintaining the space between the emotion, like their emotion, and like my headspace, you know?
You know, what you just said reminds me of something you shared the last time about an episode you had with, I believe it was both your mom and your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm able to identify, wow, my mom just made that comment to me, which was really snarky or whatever it was. I know she made the comment because she's feeling really caught up in the uncertainty, or she's really triggered by the unfairness of this, or her relationship with my dad right now is like really rocky. You know, they're really at it. So that relationship feels threatened. There are lots of different reasons, right? But the question then becomes, how do I not get reactive in that moment of their snarkiness, or of how do I not get reactive in the moment of their upset?
Mm-hmm.
That's next. That's our next topic.
The solution.
But I want you to work with SCARF between now and the next time I see you. So when I first learned SCARF, like I do with a lot of things, I decide, okay, this sounds interesting, but does it really work? I'm going to put it into practice for 30 days. So every time I felt like I was getting really reactive, I took a moment, I ran myself through it. And then by the end of the month, it just became very natural. It's just become a very natural way of living and dealing with myself and other people. And I knew that it worked because once I was able to have an understanding about why I was triggered, almost instantly it drops the charge of the trigger. And similarly, when I'm in a situation where somebody's in my face, angry, upset, whatever it is, again, our natural human instinct is to go right back at them. We have the survival instinct. It's always there. It's always ready to go. But it doesn't make for great interpersonal relationships when it's turned on all the time. So if I can sort of read, okay, this really isn't about me at all. This is about one or more of these things are being threatened. Again, I always have the freedom and the choice to make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to go back really reactive or if I'm going to become responsive. I want to share something with you that's really powerful related to responsiveness versus reactivity. And some of you might be familiar with this quote. This quote comes from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is a book that we often have to read when we're in high school or college, so it might be somewhere on one of your bookshelves. And if you've read it, you remember that Viktor Frankl was a very prestigious Hungarian psychiatrist, very, very well respected, did a lot of research on meaning and his belief. He was like on the cutting edge of creating a new theory of what it meant to be mentally healthy. And he believed that there are a lot of things that constitute mental health and well-being, but the key to really feeling good about life was being able to live through an experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, and make it meaningful. That if you're not able to do that, you're really going to suffer. So in other words, what meaning do you make out of experience? So this was his theory. It was called logotherapy. So, very well respected Hungarian psychiatrist. He and his wife and his children and his siblings and his mother and father and relatives all taken to Auschwitz. They're separated. He hears through the grapevine that every one of them has perished. And he's kept alive. And part of the reason he was kept alive was for his brilliance. And they sort of used him, to learn about the human psyche. So he's in Auschwitz, and he's having to put into practice this idea that even in the worst circumstances, in order for me to survive, I have to make meaning from this. I have to somehow find a meaning or purpose from this. But in that book, he teaches us something really important about what it means to be responsive versus reactive. So he's jailed, imprisoned, beat up, tortured, all of this stuff. And he decides while he's there, he decides, regardless of everything that's happening to me, there is one thing that no one can ever take from me. No one can ever take from me my freedom to make a choice about how I'm going to respond to my jailer, to this person who's abusing me. I get to make that choice. And he makes the equation, response, being in a responsive mindset always equates to freedom. And this quote, between stimulus and response, there is this space. And in this space resides my power to choose how I'm going to respond. And therein, always, always, always lies my freedom. So between being triggered and making a decision about, all right, what am I going to do here? I'm really triggered. There's a space, and we all have it, and we all get to claim it. It belongs to us. So no matter how off the wheels, how unhinged someone is, no one can ever take away my right and my freedom to choose how I'm going to respond. When you really take that in and work with it, remember, response will always equal your own emotional freedom. When you really take that in and start to work with it and you see that it works, it's tremendous freedom, because you will never be afraid to move through a difficult situation, because you know that no one or the situation itself can yank you around, can push you to the degree that you would become ballistic or overreactive or feeling as if you're crazed as you're dealing with a difficult person or a difficult situation. So this is really about choice. Responding always leads to, it might not be immediate, but it always leads to the result that you want. Reactivity seldom gets you where you want. Responsiveness feels like calm. It feels like compassion. I've worked with this enough to have someone having a complete tantrum directed toward me, and I can feel compassion for that person. I can maintain my composure. I might not like what's going on, but when I'm in responsivity, I can contain my composure, maintain it, and I can actually feel compassion for this person who's so highly triggered right now. It feels like openness. It feels like expansion. So we feel at peace in moments where we get triggered, but we make the decision to be responsive. How does that feel for you?
Well,
or resonate with you?
Yeah, I remember reading, I was always amazed with his mental like fortitude, Viktor Frankl. I mean, for him to be able to persevere and all that he went through, but to control his mind, I think, as he said something to that effect, like, you can't take my mind and my thoughts, like they're mine.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading a good quote yesterday, very similar to that, and it reminds me of the scarf. So, you know, Michael Lewis, the author, so it's like Liar's Poker, The Big Short,
No.
The Fifth State. So he's this wonderful writer. He's got like 9 or 10 New York Times bestsellers, a modern writer. He's like maybe 55, 60 years old now, 50 to 60, and wonderful writer. But he said, this was so true, and it reminded me of Scarf. He said there's two kind of basic people that he's written about, and all, like, mankind usually is, they have two narratives in their head to explain themselves, and one is a victim, like they're a victim of an unfair government or boss or family, spouse, an unfair situation. And then the other is, I forget how he described it, and it was pretty much the powerful, like top, I'm status, so I'm not a victim. I'm the top of the food chain, and I'm in control, and I'm doing this. And he said most people, 100%, in all the stories that I write, they're real. Like, he doesn't write fiction, but he said it's pretty much down to most human beings have those two narratives in their head. And he said, so I didn't want to be either one of those, so I just try to be, I want people to think that I'm like a happy guy. Like, in my head is happiness. Not that I'm always happy, but I don't want them to think that I'm like searching for status nor a victim. I just want them to, so he said it's made me hopefully a little bit more content because I just try to think that way.
Yeah.
So it's much like Viktor Frankl said, you can't make me think the way I don't want to think, you know?
Yeah. And choosing, knowing that you also have, and this is something that I'll get to for next time, because it's on my list, is the choice you have in any given moment for your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I used that quote from Anne Lamott last time. She writes that sometimes my mind is like a terrible, dangerous neighborhood that no one ought to enter into alone, most of all me. You know, if your mind is that place, you know, would you send your daughter in there? Would you send your dog in there? You know, sometimes the answer is no. So, okay, well, I need to clean that up. So I often refer to mindfulness as the act of minding your mind, much like you might mind. I have a colleague who wrote this incredible essay called Minding Mother, and it was about that period of time when his mother had Alzheimer's and he was tending to her. And it was he was taking care of his mother, mostly taking care of her mind. Mm-hmm. For me, mindfulness is an act of minding my own mind. And part of that is being aware fairly often of what the mindset is, whatever analogy you want to use, whether it's, am I the happy mind? Am I if you came into my mind right now, what kind of neighborhood would you be walking through? Would you face or confront? So think about, between now and the next time I see you, what do I look like when I'm in that responsive state? What does that look like? How important might it be for me on a very regular basis to remember that, like Viktor Frankl, I always have the choice. And look, I absolutely can choose to completely blow up. I can choose to go ballistic. I can choose to be reactive. But at least I know that that's what I chose. At least I know I made the decision very consciously, so that I no longer feel like I am, that my emotions or that my feelings drive me or run me, or hijack me. So I'd like to take you out with a practice. How does that sound? Do we have time?
Excuse me. Absolutely.
Yes.
Did Viktor Frankl, was he, didn't he write a lot? Like, didn't he read a lot of Invictus while he was in there? Was it Invictus? Was the, like the Stoic, with a similar like mindset from hundreds of years earlier, one of the like Stoic writers, and Frankl he said that like kept him, that's where he formulated his thoughts about that, by reading.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that he had access to reading material while he was there. I don't remember that part of his narrative, but I read
just remembered like he kept quoting that to himself, you know?
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's a woman who wrote a book called The Choice that was just published about a year ago. Her name is Dr. Edith Eva Eger, Eger. And I was actually going to show you a short video about her today, but I'll keep that for next time. So she writes the book The Choice, and it's a very similar story. She and her family are taken to Auschwitz, and somehow she gets to stay with her sister. But she talks about they didn't know what was happening. She didn't quite entirely know what was going on. But there's this beautiful moment in the book, fairly early on in the book, where her sister has been known for all of her life for her beautiful hair. Her hair is just gorgeous, and her sister never left the house without, doing her hair, and it was like the hallmark of who her sister was. So very early after they get off the trains, one of the first things that happens is that their heads are shaved. And she looks at her sister, and her sister's just like holding her hair in her hands. And her sister Magda looks to Edith and says, "How do I look?" Now, they're both girls. And Edith realizes, I have now become my sister's mirror, because there's no mirrors. And I have a choice.
Yeah.
I can tell her, oh my God, like go really reactive. Holy God, you've lost, so this is a pivotal moment. I have a choice to make here. And she looks at her sister and she says, your eyes are so beautiful. And I never noticed because your hair was always covering your eyes.
Yeah.
And that was the choice. And then the book is about all of these various choices like that she had to make along the way to save herself, save her sister. But these were choices that came out of a moment. Like the moment of being triggered is, oh my God, I can't believe my sister doesn't have hair anymore. She could have done that. Mm-hmm. She just takes that moment and she has this realization, oh, I'm her mirror now. And I need to make an important choice here. And I'm going to be responsive and focused on what's beautiful right now in this moment.
Yeah.
So this is just 3 to 5 minutes, if you'll stay with me. And there's a strategy behind this meditation that I've chosen today. And it is a meditation that asks you to focus on what we refer to in mindfulness as our essential goodness. And it's also a tool. Whenever you're feeling highly reactive, whenever those qualities of scarf are getting triggered, you can shift into a version of what I'm going to guide you through really quickly. And it'll just help to settle down the system and to take you out of stress response and reactivity. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I want to invite you to come into a seated position. If you want to turn your cameras off, feel free to do that. And to just allow those feet hip width apart to rest comfortably against the floor. And just to allow these hands to rest comfortably on the thighs. And because this is a contemplative or reflective meditation, the breath is going to be our anchor, which means that whenever you feel pulled away from the contemplation, or you're kind of losing, you maybe lost sense of what the contemplation was, whatever it is, just come back to your breath. And so for the first few moments, I just want you to notice where you're feeling the breath the most. Where is the sensation of the breath most strong for you right now? And I want you to bring to mind a moment that you've had recently where you said or you did something that made another person feel better, that made things a little bit easier for them. And as you're remembering that moment of really helping or supporting, that moment of kindness, or that moment where maybe you elevated someone. Just really allow and open up to feeling what that was like. If you've drifted, guide your awareness back to your breath. No matter what's happening, we can always trust that essentially we are all good. allowing yourselves to drop down and into your own essential goodness. Can be a sanctuary. A place to rest. Gently guide your awareness back to your breath. And then whenever you're ready, open your eyes. I wanted to share that meditation with you today because it's the meditation I've actually been using for the last 3 or 4 days. I just want to, let's see. I wanted to unmute all of you. So it's a practice that I've been using for the last couple of days, and I found it to be really effective for myself. And I've struggled with anxiety my entire life. I have noticed that over the course of these 8 or 9 weeks now at home, I've lost count, that my anxiety level is really kicking up. I don't quite understand it. So I've been really having to work on keeping myself out of that frantic reactive mindset, creating pathways to responsivity as often as I can. And that's one of the strategies that's really worked for me. So before we go, how did that feel for you?
Well,
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. It felt great. It got me out of like, you know how I said it's difficult at the end of the day to get your mind from racing to stop racing. It's like you're fatigued when it's racing. So
Yeah.
that kind of slowed everything down, which was really nice.
Yeah. So what we're doing in that meditation is we're actually generating how it feels when we're of service to other people, and reconnecting to our own goodness, which again, I said things like, in any circumstance, when you're feeling really charged, really reactive, just take a moment and even just in that moment, bring to mind, try to elicit, bring to mind or evoke just what we did here, which was, what was the last thing I did for someone that just felt really good? And I knew was supportive or kind or loving or elevated them. And just that reconnection can kind of halt or interrupt that stress response from just going full blown. Mary?
Yeah, I thought it felt good too. So my mind has been racing a lot, so it's good to like slow the brain down, like everyone is saying. And I don't even know like what it's racing with. It's weird. It's like your brain just takes over your body and you don't even know, like you sit back and think like, I don't even know what I just wasted that last 20 minutes thinking about. It's kind of bizarre, but I find that the meditation, sometimes I don't really like hear what's being asked or said or the breathing so much. It's just like stopping myself dead in my tracks. So it's calming in that regard.
Yeah, so it actually doesn't even matter if you didn't hear anything I said. If you found rest, just some rest in that, that's good. Olivia?
Yeah, by the time you were asking how it felt, I knew it felt good, but I had forgotten that like the beginning when you're like, oh, like think of a time where you made someone feel good. So thank you for that refresher. And like my automatic response was, wow, I'm not very nice to people. But then I came up with some with some nice things, which made me feel like not a bad person. So
Good. Well, we should, connecting to your own essential goodness. Again, if you just start doing it, then you start to feel connected to it more often than not. And then it gets you out of the judgment and it gets you out of self-disappointment, and which is all draining. It's just all very, very draining to the system. So thank you for being here today.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
Sorry.
Thank you.
I'll see you all next time for lesson 7. And I think Jen will be back with you on Thursday, correct?
I believe so. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. Thank you.
Join in with us, Christine.
You know, I have to teach on Thursday. I do a lot of teaching for Leadership Wilkes-Barre.
Oh, good.
So they took their whole program online so that they can get their class of 2020 through the program. So I'm going to be teaching that day. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But I'll join you at another time.
Sounds good.
I bet it's nice. All right. Take care.
Bye.
too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Mary. Bye, Liv.
Bye, Dad. Bye, Olivia.
Bye, Mary.